What I want to do, I've got about 3 to 5 minutes to give you a little background and talk to you about Tennessee. Tennessee, the number one industry in Tennessee is agriculture, and of the agriculture as a whole, the number one sector of that is livestock. And of livestock, in the last couple of years, poultry has edged cow-calf, beef cow-calf. So it's a within our state, we have 3 of the major primary breeders. And primary breeders are commercial poultry companies that supply poultry meat genetics to the world. And so that sets the stage to what happened next. And just to give you a very brief background of avian influenza, I'll do the best I can, and then one of the other state vets can jump in here, because Mia Torchetti she's the expert on this, and I've been on calls with her the last month, and she's educated me. So most of the stuff I'm telling you now, I just learned this in the last month when I got thrust into it. But basically, avian influenza, they're type A influenzas, and there's really kind of 3 types, if you will, that state veterinarians deal with on a fairly regular basis. Also, although some whole states have never even had a case of avian influenza in a commercial flock. Georgia was one of those and just had their first. Dr. Cobb's really excited about that in the last few weeks. But the first one is, and these are based on the structure of the virus and the pathogenicity. And so on the structure of the virus, they're made of amino acids, and the ones that the USDA is concerned with and state veterinarians are concerned with the most are the ones that are typed out as H5 or H7. So H5 or H7, if you get one of those are notifiable to OIE, and that can have trade implications worldwide. And so the first category of AI that, and Tennessee's dealt with all 3 of them now. I never thought it would come to Tennessee, but it did. The first one is low path or no path, non-H5H7. And so if through testing you get one of those, USDA is out of that. If it's not notifiable, if it's not H5H7, I say they're out of it. The state handles that however they see fit. The second one is, and this is the one that we've had the second time in Tennessee this has happened, is low path H5 or H7. And then the last category is high path H5H7. So those are the 3 different ones, just briefly. It may be more than you wanted to know, but those are the three types that we deal with. And the responses to those are different, the way that animal health officials respond to those. So on Friday morning, March the 3rd of last month, my life changed a lot. And I see Linda's shaking. Any of the state vets that have gone through this know what I'm talking about. So since that time, for about a month solid, we've been working 7 days a week on this. So on that Friday morning, we had one of our commercial poultry companies that had hens. It appears that hens are the ones that are susceptible to this. We did not see it in broilers. I'll talk about that in just a second. But anyhow, they had a high death loss. Brought some of the dead hens into the lab as well as some swabs of some sick birds as well. And by early afternoon, we had a diagnosis at our local state lab, which is part of a national network, that we had a detectable level of H7, which was a PCR we run at that lab. And so then it was overnighted to USDA, and there was a decision made amongst USDA, myself, and the what do they call the ADDs now? The USDA person, or whatever it is, assistant director, that we go ahead. The best way to control a high path AI situation is depopulate as quick as you can, preferably within 24 hours. And so that occurred. And then 3 days later, we had a diagnosis also at our state lab, and it was forwarded on to NVSL for typing, was low path H7. And then on the 13th, we had our second detection of high path AI within the control zone. So if you have high path AI, you set up a 6.2 mile control zone, and movements are controlled. There's constant surveillance, constant monitoring, and that control zone is under a microscope, if you will. So in a matter of 10 days, we had 2 high path and 1 low path at commercial flock locations. And those responses are different. I will tell you, I've never been in the military. My grandfather was career military, and my father retired as Army Reserve after many years. But fighting disease, at least high path AI or foreign animal disease, is kind of like going to war. You've got these different battles. And so we set it up as everybody else had with what you call incident command structure. And so we already had, thanks to the states that have gone before Tennessee that have had this issue, and thanks to the National Assembly and all the other state vets, thanks to the industry and secure poultry plans, a lot of planning had taken place, at least in Tennessee, so we thought we were reasonably ready. Nothing can really prepare you for it, but we were reasonably prepared, and we have been able to, at least we only had two high path breaks, the initial one and the one later, but the second outbreak was less than a mile from the first one, and they tell me it's almost impossible to keep a lateral transmission. But as far as we know now, it sure looks like these were pinpoint introductions, and NVSL typed this out as a North American wild bird lineage H7N9. So now, as far as this had an immediate impact upon Tennessee's export, because as soon as the high path announcement was made by USDA, or they notified the trading partners, there were immediate restrictions put on. I don't know how many countries were involved, 30 countries or more. You know, Dr. Marsh, how many? But a lot of countries. And so they all respond differently. Some of them banned poultry products from certain counties of Tennessee. Some of them banned the whole state, and then other countries banned the whole United States. So it had a huge impact. At one of the talks I was at this morning, one of the poultry veterinarians talked about I don't know if Dr. Torres is in here or not, is he? Now, he said that they had lost at least $5 million worth of planned exports that they had. He knew they at least lost that much for just one company. So it's been a huge impact. I don't know how much yet, but and that's not counting the domestic trade as well, because it complicates things on interstate movement and so on and so forth. But I'll stop there, let Dr. Stout go, because he joined the party just a little bit later.
And I appreciate it, Charlie, sharing the grief. I came to this job in 2003, actually, as Homeland Security Coordinator before being State Veterinarian. And that was in the post 9/11 era. Had been to the END outbreak in California. And shortly after that, we had about 2 years of a pandemic scare that fortunately never happened. But through that, I was introduced to kind of the principles of emergency response and disease response. And I think it would be good to just review those, because we talked about them a lot, and we haven't talked a lot about them lately, even though we are practicing. The first one of those is awareness. And I don't think probably any industry in agriculture has more surveillance looking at what the situation is than poultry as regards to avian influenza and other diseases that affect that industry. It's done constantly within their marketing structure and very, very important to what they do, especially to exports. Preparedness is that planning part of it that we've all gone through, complete with test exercises. In 2009, we did have a low-path avian influenza outbreak in a single premises in Kentucky. actually 2 weeks after we had just had a tabletop exercise. And one of the most important things that came out of that exercise was knowing who we were dealing with. The companies that were involved were at the table at that exercise, and we became actually friends, and then had to deal with the situation live within 2 weeks. Obviously, prevention is the key to all of our things that Charlie and I do. Biosecurity being at the forefront of that. Poultry industry, again, is a leader in biosecurity, complete with audits and all kinds of safeguards to make sure that everybody is doing it every day. When we get in a situation like we're in the response mode. Early detection is paramount to what we can do to make this thing as small as it is and contain it within an area. And Charlie's done a great job along with Tony Frazier in Alabama. Our particular outbreak is isolated to one county with about 12 commercial premises and actually one that we classified as a backyard premises, even though it is associated with commercial industry. We have done surveillance across all of the commercial properties in that control zone. Well, it's not a control zone, it's a surveillance zone. Terminology gets important, especially as it regards international trade. They listen to the words that we're saying. But we have found no spread within that surveillance zone, and both of the premises that were identified as being confirmed presumptive positive, and that's a whole different discussion as to exactly what that means, have been depopulated and have been buried now for almost 2 weeks. The last phase, which I hope we're going to be entering very soon, is recovery, and that's getting everything back to normal. And while I hope we have all of our surveillance finished and can release the surveillance zone, probably D-Day is April the 12th, barring any interruption of that. There will still be things that will have to be done before international trade can be completely restored. One thing that I found very, very important in preparing for and then addressing a situation like this is partnerships. And when I came to this, there were two obstacles that I had. One was knowledge. I knew nothing about poultry. And the other was trust. The poultry industry at that time did not trust the state veterinarian's office, unfortunately. And I had an employee that worked for me that was integrated into that and actually got me to the right people. And I think now we're able to say that we do have a lot of trust. When 2015 was upon us, and certainly not in Kentucky, but we were all on red alert. I reached out to all of the industries and actually visited with them on site and reviewed their emergency plan with them, which they obviously all have a very sophisticated plan to deal with this. So as Charlie indicated, one of our primary partners is USDA, and we're fortunate to have our two offices now a parking lot apart. So it's just a matter of walking out the back door to communicate. And they have more veterinarians on staff, a lot of them with experience from 2015 and 16, 14 and 15, I guess, with the high path incident. That experience has been invaluable to us as we've dealt with the outbreak that we have now. The Kentucky Poultry Federation is the conduit to the industries. It's basically made up of all the commercial industries. Within it, there is a board of directors and then a poultry animal health committee, which they allow me to serve on both of those bodies. That body developed the low-path avian influenza plan, which was to be our guide in dealing with what we have today. In the midst of it, we found that some things had changed, and that plan wasn't going to be followed, so we're on plan B or C, depending on how you want to count. And that plan is very integral to the NPIP program that guides a lot of the things that the commercial industries have to deal with on a surveillance and an international trade situation. I made the decision, actually back in 2009, that we were going to let the companies handle their outbreak as best they could until they were overwhelmed. And that's what we did in the recent one. The company that was involved did the bulk of their testing. They did their own depopulation and their own burial with oversight both from the state and with USDA. Other partners that we have, and we're very fortunate to have two excellent NOM labs in Kentucky, one at the University of Kentucky and the other one at Hopkinsville, Kentucky, which is the Breathitt Veterinary Center associated with Murray State University. Other state agencies are involved anytime we have a situation like this and in our planning. And Kentucky Fish and Wildlife Resources is an integral partner in doing surveillance within the wild bird population that we feel like is the incriminator in this current situation. UK Extension plays a vital part, especially with our backyard poultry and educating those people and letting them know what's going on, especially as it pertains to biosecurity. Kentucky Emergency Management is always on the alert to help us with resources as we need them. We have a person dedicated in my office to be the liaison to them. Department of Public Health plays a part, and that's kind of in my face just lately with some news releases that have come out. Some of you even asked me about it, about the second outbreak. I guess we didn't do a good job of updating our press release because the second outbreak actually happened 2 weeks ago, and I'm just now getting questions about it. But that came from a story that an MD did for Medscape regarding our outbreak. And I guess we didn't do a good enough job of reaching out to those folks. I was spoiled because we had a veterinarian that worked in public health for most of the time that I've been state veterinarian that had an integral relationship with my office, and he unfortunately passed away this past year. And so we have a void there, I think, that wasn't really recognized until it was a little late getting some information out. Another one that you may not have thought about is the Division of Conservation. Our first choice in getting rid of the carcasses on the infected properties was burial. You can't just bury anywhere, especially in Kentucky. There's a rock shelf under it, and there's all kinds of drainage from caves, etc. So we have to get approval, not necessarily permitting, but approval from the water quality people as to where we're going to bury them. They had been contacted previously. They knew what we were talking about when we called them this time, and they were very, very quick to address the needs of the company in getting those birds put in the ground. Another entity that you deal with anytime in Kentucky is local government. And we have judge executives in every county, and it's kind of their kingdom. And so it's really good to let them know what's going on anytime you have a bunch of government vehicles running around their neighborhood. So that's just a little bit of an overview of from a generality standpoint of how we deal with disease issues in Kentucky.